now I'm stuck in this loop again. It got me thinking now, should I take it or leave it out? What would happen if I talk to you? Got a feeling that I get a clue. Would you be my Fortnite? Would you be my Fortnite? Would you be my Fortnite? It got me thinking now, should I take it or leave it out? It got me thinking now, and now I'm stuck in this loop again. It got me thinking now, should I take it or leave it out? What would happen if I talk to you? Got a feeling that I get a blue. Would you be my Fortnite? What would happen if I talk to you? Would you be my Fortnite? Got a feeling that I get a blue. It got me thinking now. Would you be my Fortnite? What would happen if I talk to you? It got me thinking now. Would you be my Fortnite? What would happen if I talk to you? Would you be my Fortnite?
Lights they flicker and the candles glitter like you're in a thriller. Heart goes pum pum pum. Ghostly figures they can get so bitter. Show you want to until you can turn back. You don't know where I've been. What's going on inside? Where the monsters like to come alive, come alive. Do you really wanna know me? I'm really not that cozy. It's up to you, so you decide, you decide. Would you love me up my words till the coffin's in the dirt? Try to break me like a curse, you know that will never work. I'm a little bit absurd. I like dancing on the verge. Anyone can love a pretty little mansion, but could you love a haunted, haunted house? Or could you love me now? A haunted, haunted. I'm a haunted house. A haunted, haunted house. If you're too scared, get out. A haunted, haunted. I'm a haunted house. Broken windows and a warning scribbled on my wall saying that you better turn around. Wouldn't be the first to try to burn me down. Your move, you too. Would you love me up my words till the coffin's in the dirt? Try to break me like a curse, you know that will never work. I'm a little bit absurd. I like dancing on the verge. Anyone can love a pretty little mansion, but could you love a haunted, haunted house? Or could you love me now? A haunted, haunted.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning. I don't know when or where you're watching this. Welcome to week 4 of the Learner Drivers podcast. It has been a very busy week in Collegiate Rocket League. As you can see, I'm joined by Nualaic and not KJ on this fine Wednesday. In fact, we've got Psycho, and you've been keeping up with all the action. It's just It's just very nice to have you here. What has been the standout features for you over the past week?
Well, clearly, as the new KJ replacement, I must clearly big up the results from UEA. So I think that's going to be my first talking point, maybe my second, my third, my fourth, and my fifth for the night. So UEA is honestly the greatest team alive, and I think the fact that they were able to push through to UR Winter and also secure a spot in the NSE playoffs is the best thing on earth.
Yeah,
you know
fair
what?
and balanced take. I'm going to go opposite direction and say Qualifier 3 was going real well up until UEA qualified, and then it was off the rails fully.
Qualifier
Fair
3.
and balanced takes. Fair and balanced takes only.
I think the worst thing is that we all looked at Qualifier 3 and thought it was a little bit of a mess until Qualifier 4 rolled around. And then, I mean, I just want to put it out there that if you are looking at these topics to our left, I didn't write them. They're not my idea. You can probably guess whose they were, as we will, of course, begin talking about the UR Qualifier 3, which is probably the best place we should start. There's a lot we got to get through today, including, of course, releasing the UR Winter Round 1 fixtures. But cast our minds back nearly a week till Thursday last week when Qualifier 3 came around, and we were discussing that week, Noor, as well. Would Genoa make it? And we were pretty torn on whether they had the throw potential. I, for one, kind of expected them to throw Qualifier 3, but they looked good.
It wasn't an unfair assumption going into that week, but Qualifier 3 was, it was the start of the back half of our qualifiers. After the first two, it had been looking a little bit dicey for a lot of the top teams. Genoa, one of the teams that got us together, Lisbon also then getting it together to get through. There were a couple of teams that I'm sure we'll mention when we get to Qualifier 4 who didn't manage to pull it together. But Genoa, definitely the first team that really started to look good on the day. They were the first team to qualify through that as well. And they did it against some decent opposition as well, took down the UEC Stags on the way, took down Dortmund in this final match as well. Had some nice goals as we're seeing here on stream. And it's exciting. I'm really excited to see the Italian team make it through, and I'm glad they didn't throw.
Yeah, I think the fact that they got through quickly, relatively quickly at least, in UR Winter 3 was pretty substantial in terms of a result for them, because it's just looking at the teams that didn't make it even through the fourth qualifier, like Roehampton, for example, makes it just a little bit more impressive for me.
Yeah, I think the runners, of course, you see the highlights from their qualification series against Dortmund. They beat VUB, of course, best team in Belgium, really. They beat the full roster UWE, which, of course, effectively died that last week. So that result part of the reason. And, yeah, convincingly beating all of them, including Dortmund, of course. It was the Genoa that we sort of expected to see at a time, whereas now I think we've sort of, at least me personally, sort of leveled down the hype just a little bit, because we know they have that high ceiling, but the fact that they have taken 3 qualifiers to qualify, I feel like it's credit to their inconsistency.
Let me give you, though, a slight counterpoint to that, which is that in some ways, I think it's probably better for the team that they had to qualify through Qualifier 3. And I think that's true for a lot of our teams that were 3 and 4. They ended up playing a lot more Rocket League at the international level over the course of the last couple of weeks than, the teams that just cruised through in the first qualifier. Now, I still think, I'm not looking at Genoa versus Hamburg and being like, well, Genoa, now they've played a lot more games than Hamburg in Europe, so we're going to contest. The teams that got through in Qualifier 1 are still incredibly strong, but this, I think you could paint it as a positive for Genoa. I do agree that you probably have to step off the gas on the hype train a little bit, but I still think that they were coming together over the course of it, and they do look they're approaching the levels that we were hoping for them.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I feel like Genoa, especially considering the inconsistency they showed in the Wildcard League, it is just nice to see a really strong day put through for them. And you mentioned maybe Genoa against Hamburg, how they'd fare in that matchup. Is that a confirmed matchup for round 1? I don't think that actually is. But you also mentioned another team, and I'd like to ask you about them, Psycho, in Lisbon. Because, at least for me, coming into this year, hearing that we'd have a proper relevant team out of Portugal, for me, this is probably the team I'm most excited about.
Yeah, and honestly, for me, this team, before even the UR Winter qualifiers began, this was the team that I was sort of looking at. And I thought could be potentially even a CRL contending sort of dark horse, maybe floating around the 5th and 6th spot if they did give it like 100%, because all three players I recognise from Portuguese competition, and they're known to be some of the strongest players domestically over there, yet alone just from the collegiate space, just talking about European play as well. So the likes of XYZ, for example, he was competing way back in leagues like the Iberian League with loads of success, taking down teams like Super Mode, I remember, which was an incredible Spanish team at the time.
Goodness.
He was taking on teams like that even about, 3-4 years ago. So the fact that IUL haven't actually managed to push through a little bit earlier is almost a surprise to me. But just looking briefly at their run from UR Winter 3 as well, when they were playing the likes of Stuttgart, UEA and Doran's
They beat
Boxfish.
UEA.
They beat UEA, which honestly I'm so angry about. I'm absolutely fuming because UEA is clearly the greatest team of all time. But yeah, they are a seriously strong team, and I think the only thing that is sort of a difference maker is just time. So time will tell how strong of a team they can be. Right now, I'm not surprised that there's a couple of flaws still with them.
Qualifier 3 was going so well. We had the upper bracket. It was like, great, we've got an Italian team through. We get a Portuguese team competing in Europe at the top level now. And then the lower bracket happened. And then UEA came back with a vengeance. And you're like, oh, no, Europe is still Europe, isn't it?
Yeah, this is kind of. I feel bad for IUL, really, in the sense that I feel like they could have so easily got through qualifier 2 in that crazy Game 5 overtime series against Dr. Bowman's Hanover. Like, I think we'd be like even higher on them had they have won that series. But for me, as well, it is just like you don't really know what you're going to get out of them, which it kind of makes it more exciting as well. But I'm very happy to have had them in the main event, as of course it did go to the lower bracket, and we got a second Doran's team qualified, a second team from Nijmegen, first team, of course, to get two teams in the main event since Groningen in 2020.
Yeah, and we've gone in depth on the names of those Groningen teams, Martini versus Mojito, and this is Boxfish versus the other one, who are just calling themselves Nima, the team from last year, but are split up. Zane and Anya, we've talked about it plenty. The duo that was performing very well, separating out onto these two teams. And I think we've just decided that we're going to call them, this is Doran's Boxfish, is Doran's B, but it's not Doran's A on the other side, it's just Doran's N. It's impossible to actually split the quality of these two teams. I found it hard when looking at the teams that had qualified to put either of them on the day, and probably is going to make top 8. I just have no idea which one it is, and that's making it hard.
That may have been a bit ambitious, but it's the demo afterwards that's dangerous. Anya's shot is good, and we're back.
Like, that's on me. I'll admit that.
Think I got the point, Nua. I'm just worried that either us or Discord was sort of dying during that sentence.
Almost
actually.
definitely my
Partial
internet.
death.
All I was saying was I'm very confused by Doran's.
I see. I mean, Doran's are kind of conflicting because we had a bit of an argument about it this last week, and I'm curious on your take on it, Psycho. Who are the Doran's A team? Because we're going to label them Doran's B and Doran's
Right.
N for helpfulness, but who would be the A team for you?
So it's so controversial, but to me, I just think Boxfish on paper are the stronger side, and I think that's just purely based off the players on the roster more so than recent results, even if Doran's Nimmer have also team with the higher sort of skill ceiling. But again, it's so difficult to tell because Doran's Nimmer just historically have that sort of consistency, and whenever Shane hits the pitch, he's just, well, insane. He's pretty damn good at the game, so it's very hard to tell.
Well, I mean, I respect the take because I still think it's up in the air. We are praying, all of us, partially, because we've kind of figured out that this is actually on Discord's end, and it's not actually...
Not my
Nua's.
internet.
It's not on
Huge.
Nua's side. It's a celebration. There's really nothing we can do about it. So we will fight on through and assume that I'm probably going to die at some point during what I'm saying. I'm yet to be stricken down by the Discord.
Listen, I told you guys we should have invested in the sign language, like sub on the dubbing last week.
Okay,
we would be
but-
fine right now. Okay.
I mean, I feel like the video feeds of us are also probably... I don't know, I guess they won't be entirely in jeopardy. Maybe sign language would be good. There is, of course, unfortunately, one more team that did qualify through UR Winter Qualifier 3. Now, if you were watching that last Thursday, you'll realize that at no point were the UEA Blue Jays on stream. We didn't get to see their qualification run. So what I did, I went back and went into the replays and recorded a couple clips so you can indeed see how it happened in their qualification series in the lower bracket against Dortmund. Psycho, as our UEA representative here, effectively in honor of KJ, talk us through this.
Let's have a look. So immediately, UEA are just absolutely on fire in offense. There's 0 seconds left on the clock. A wonderful shot from Eklantmakers, and the defense just doesn't exist, so we scored.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep going. So now there's a ball in the corner. Eklantmakers is going to
happen again.
shoot, and there just isn't a goalkeeper covering the front post. It's just the shot is at such a thin angle that if you have any sort of player in the net covering that side of things, it's a save.
But it gets
but
better.
we scored. It gets better.
The way-
Snipers downfield, and then there's just a miss, and it goes in. It goes in. Nobody knows how, but it's in. It's magical.
It's game 5 overtime. To think how close Dortmund were to winning this series. Bear in mind, Dortmund lost a qualification in uppers, then this in lowers in qualifier 3. Like this. They would then go on to lose 2 more qualification series in qualifier 4. 4 different qualification series. Dortmund lost them all. Is that the worst? Is that the worst case of ice in Uni Rocket League history? Outside of maybe Liverpool against Kent for a singular game. I mean, what can top that, guys? We can think of a lot of series, but this is
I don't
This is
think
a low
you can
point.
top it. And the way it happened is just very much unmatched. It makes me so sad saying that, because I absolutely love Dortmund to pieces as well.
Yeah.
I truly wish for them to succeed, and yet, it's so
They
sad.
were like, I really had fun watching this Dortmund team in qualifier 4. Like, they were playing
sorry.
really fun Rocket League. Have I died again?
I know, no, I thought you go. I really had fun watching this Dortmund team lose and not qualify. The way you were saying,
Honestly,
you were saying it, it
honestly,
sounded
but, like they were playing like the redirects from Kevin were genuinely like one of the highlights for me from qualifier 4. Like, a lot of the goals they scored came off really sick passing plays that were like really clean goals. But then, like, you go back and you watch how, like, the entire downfall started and where the ice really started to slip, and you're like, ooh. They're like Roehampton, Genoa, like, they need to start sending, like, rewards to these guys. They need to give them a present, because, like, nobody can talk about lack of ice for any other team in UR Winter qualifiers after what Dortmund did in the last 2 qualifiers, unfortunately for them.
Yeah, no. I mean, there are some real low points across the qualifiers. I mean, Portsmouth not finishing their sign up for qualifier 4, Salford dissolving, UWE dissolving. But even like individual games, the triple Aaron own goal, like all of these were freak moments. But this wasn't just a freak throw like against UEA. They lost 4 qualification series. Like, it's just
Misery.
it stops being funny at some point and starts being really sad because they've completely missed out on the UR main event, and that's gonna be hitting them in the fields until spring rolls around.
I hope they're still here in spring. It's really the main thing, because, you know, I mean, there's still domestic competition for a little while longer, but it's a little while until, you know, you play in spring, and the teams that are competing now, because there's a lot of German teams in UR Winter, and they're all going to be playing and scrimming and improving, and if Dortmund aren't one of those teams, the motivation to scrim drops off a little bit. So, I don't know. Like, they were there. They were in the range of being one of the German teams competing, and I'm hoping we don't see them regress for spring now, because, yeah, there's an argument that they should be here.
I also think regardless of how much is going to really just hit them in the face and tell them to stop in terms of how miserable their affair has been, I think there is still something in those players which is still like highly motivated, though, because Trizeltan, he's been playing outside of Collegiate Rocket League for a very long time now. Even going back sort of a year or so, he was breaking into sort of the low bubble space as well on teams like Donkey Punch, and he was actually winning some bubble competitions as well. There was a team called I can't remember who now, but he's been competing for a very long time, and the pairing of Trizeltan and Repi have very much been together for a long time now. So I still think the motivation is there, and that's probably what's the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see it in terms of how much they want to scrim as well. Like for the UR main event teams as well. I don't know what it was like as a player even last year, Psycho, like getting scrims and trying to get regular scrims. From the outside looking in, it felt like you could get the scrims, but it would almost always seem to be against the same small pool of teams, because it seemed like only a subset of the participants were really scrimming that often, or maybe I didn't see those scrims happening.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're looking at the very top end, it's rare that you're going to sort of have those scrims. So, for example, last year, I don't think we scrimmed Berlin once. Well, maybe only once, and that's about it. Even though they were sort of, in our heads at least, our direct sort of competition. So it is quite difficult to find that sort of thing. But for the likes of someone like Trizzletan, who might have those sort of bubble links as well, just giving someone a message, even if it's someone outside of Collegiate Rocket League as well, even if it's not quite testing of how you're going to match against your direct competition, it's also something that can sort of build you as well. So last year we had loads of scrims against sort of just external teams, external people who had just said, yeah, let's give it a go, see what happens. So I'm sure there will be teams doing that, but as you say, it's still quite difficult if the teams around you aren't wanting to so much.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. Sorry, no.
While we have Psycho here, that's reminding me of a question that I wanted to ask you, which is for you. You know the Portsmouth team, at least 2 members of it better than anyone else,
Yep.
probably all 3. The fact that they haven't qualified for UR Winter versus like maybe cruising through, do you think that's going to motivate them to try and like work harder towards spring, or do you think that's going to be a knock to the Portsmouth team?
I honestly think it's a knock more so than anything, especially just looking from sort of our position as of a couple months ago. You've sort of experienced the highest of highs, and there can't really be anything higher, inverted commas. So moving on from that, it's quite difficult to try and find the fuel, find the new thing that's going to push you to achieve if it's sort of lower than what you've already done. So for the Portsmouth guys, I think it's been quite difficult to keep themselves motivated. But that being said as well, they are still very much driven because they know they are a capable team. They know that they can absolutely put themselves in the same spots. And, you know, if they would have given all those qualifiers a go, maybe even qualified for UR Winter this time around as well. So it's difficult.
That's the sad thing. I feel like when you realize that even in qualifier 2, I believe it was, beating Roehampton, who would then go on, of course, to qualify. In qualifier 4, which, I mean, we've got How to DQ from round 1 featuring qualifier 4. Those of you who are there will know there was many DQs. So many DQs, in fact, that Manchester managed to get to within 2 series of qualifying without playing a series. So fortune smiled on some teams more so than others, though it was finally the time for Roehampton, Noah.
It was finally the time for Roehampton, and I think a lot of people look at the bracket and they're going to say they did beat Dortmund. All right, of course they beat Dortmund. Everyone beat Dortmund in the qualifier match, this UR qualifiers. But a lot of people are going to argue that Roehampton had an easy road to this qualification match. They're not necessarily wrong. The match before their qualification match was against the Manchester, who were there because all of their opponents had DQ'd. But I think, you know, you can look at Dortmund and say they had the quality to make it to 4 qualification matches, right? This was a good team. And I honestly think Roehampton looked really good against them. I think they showed a bit more of what they've been doing at the NSE level. They had things a bit more together. And I'm excited tentatively for them, right? Like, they'd been choking pretty hard. Again, thanks to Dortmund for covering that up. Roehampton are no longer the team that was choking hardest in UR qualifiers. But they looked pretty strong in their first actual test of qualifier 4. Luckily for them, that was their qualification match.
Yeah, I think it's just a bit... You know, were Roehampton choking? I mean, for me, I don't know, Psycho. In the sense that it was choking that there was a lot of expectation and hype around them. But the way they were losing games, I was just like, well, the other team's just better today.
Yeah, I feel like in the majority of cases that I was seeing Roehampton lose, it was simply because they just didn't seem to have the drive, the aggression that other teams had. So usually they were just stuck in their own back third for about half of the game and just having sporadic sort of 1v1 counter-attacks and scoring goals off of that. And the thing is, they just couldn't really register any shots on the board for the majority of the times that I was watching them, simply because they had no attacking presence. And I think that's maybe the one thing that has changed recently, just sort of that shift away from trying to make sure everything is perfect to something a bit more sort of free roaming, if you like. Something about them has changed. But even looking at UR Winter 4, the qualifier, their run wasn't exactly tricky compared to some teams that also had to qualify for UR Winter as well, with UOB, Manchester and Dortmund. It's just, there were teams that were on paper stronger than that, who could have been faced, which weren't faced. So that wasn't really telling, I don't think, of their full capabilities, maybe.
I agree, but like that's what I'm saying. Like they still swept Dortmund, and like Dortmund lost all their qualification matches, but they put up stronger fights against some teams in those qualification matches. And I think watching that match, Roehampton looked pretty good against them. Like that could have been more of a test. And it's as much, I think, credit to Roehampton that people are looking at that match and being like, yeah, they had an easy road in. It's like, yeah, they made that Dortmund match look easy. It didn't necessarily have to look that good for them.
It's nice. Like Roehampton, it's kind of. I just feel like, as much as I want to talk about them, you mentioned a team that they beat, Psycho. You said UOB.
Yep.
Does that stand for something? Remind me.
Birmingham.
Oh, do we? I think we actually have an update on that particular team. Can we go to our roaming reporter actually again? No, he's died. Apparently, there is no update because we were told that we weren't meant to talk about Birmingham. There was a request, I think, that we weren't meant to talk about Birmingham. Just double check. Are we allowed to talk about Birmingham? Because I kind of want to talk about them. And I know we have someone just ready to go. No, apparently we're not allowed to talk about them. But apparently they really didn't want us to talk about them. I don't know why. It's almost like the results have gone a bit sideways, but that's okay. We can talk about the second team that qualified through Qualifier 4. And it was a team that I was, similar to Genoa Nua, very severely worried about maybe they would throw. And they actually have got in. We have a Danish representative in the UR main event. But how do you feel about this Aalborg side? For me, the question is, this was meant to be an upgrade, yet they seem to be more shaky than before.
They do, and it was something I talked about a lot last season when we came in. Pondex is the name on this squad, right? You know, the player with RLCS experience. Everyone's very excited about Pondex the whole time. But part of the reason I felt the squad always worked so well was, and I've talked about this an awful lot, was the duo that they had of Mel and Gibmeister. It was like, yeah, they're worse players than Pondex, but they were playing really well as a duo, and then they had Pondex maneuvering around the pitch, filling in the gaps and doing Pondex things around them. And with that dynamic gone, I just feel they're struggling a little bit to find their footing with, as you say, an upgrade on paper, but not necessarily an upgrade in terms of how this team is playing. With that said, come Qualifier 4, like a lot of the teams that qualified through Qualifier 4, you know, I think I talked about Roehampton, I think finding their footing a little bit. I think Eel Castle were starting to find their footing as well. And it's good.
It's the weird thing for me is, were you casting this series, Psycho? Is the question that I have. I cannot remember who was casting this, but Aalborg are 2-0 up in this series, and then the reverse sweep begins to occur, and yet also they were 2-0 up in Game 5, and they still threw that to overtime. Like, you look at the highlights, this was a messy series.
It was very messy, and I think the one thing that Ilcastle maybe have lost since last year was that sort of solidity that they found with Gibmeister. And Zacharias coming into this year, I very much thought it was going to be a massive upgrade as well. But like you say, just even holding on to those leads when they're 2-0 up in a series, everything's in their favour. It's looked to be a lot more difficult of late. But I think the only exceptions to that is sort of the UR Wildcard League, which they have absolutely stomped, even when stuff has got a little bit tight. They have just won pretty much everything and easily booked the #1 spot in that league. But I still think there is a lot to come from the roster as well, because having Laskiri and also Zacharias as options in terms of two different playstyles, it also means you can sort of chop and change. It makes life quite easy. I think they're the one team that I've ever seen that actually maybe works with a 4-man roster, actually.
That's an interesting point. I was actually going to discuss that as well and see what you think about it, Dua, because it seems like we have 2 4-man roster sides, or maybe 3 if you count Exeter. But in the cases of Aalborg and Amsterdam, I think from a player standpoint, I mean, it's nice from an availability standpoint, but it's kind of weird because you want to get used to who you're playing with, no?
It does. It comes down to that question as well of, is Rocket League a game, or are you a team where you're going to upset your opponents more by being able to change up your playstyle with a different player versus upsetting yourselves more? And it's a lot of work. I mean, you essentially, if you want to be as comfortable with 2 different players, you're just doubling your scrim time if you want to try it that way. Or, not necessarily doubling it, but then maybe if you're not committing to one option, then you're potentially hamstringing yourself. You are not the best version of yourself that you could be coming into competition. Eel Castle, the side that they qualified with, was they played with Laskiri. They look very good in that configuration. The the question does become, do any of these teams that have a potential 4-man roster really want to commit to that as, and I'm going to call it a gimmick. I think it is a little bit of a gimmick, and I think you do need to prove that you are able to change up your playstyle significantly in a way that can upset your opponents without just destroying your own synergy on the pitch.
Yeah. I think I agree. I don't know. It's. Would you have ever had a 4-man roster when playing Psycho?
Absolutely never. From a personal standpoint, it just doesn't happen. Because, like you say, it's like you're trying to put in the practice. You're trying to learn how to synergize best with the team, right? And if the team is always changing, you always need to learn something new. So it's like they essentially have to work with 2 teams. They have to improve 2 separate rosters, at least currently, because every single time I watch them play, they're playing with a different third. In Laskyria or Zacharias, they just chop and change. So it's strange because from sort of a spectating point of view, it works because strangely, Laskyria, the last time I watched him play, he was by far the best player on the field, I thought, which was absolutely bonkers. He was doing so much of the heavy lifting when it came to the offense as well, especially given sort of the more passive nature of Pondex and Melby. He was sort of that volatile player who could actually deliver something, and Zacharias fills a very similar role. So I'm not sure which is the best way forward for them, but it is what it is.
But that is the point then as well. It's like if they're both filling the same role, it's great. Like it makes the swap very easy if you do need to change one of them, and that's great from a pure like availability sub standpoint. But in terms of like a 4-man roster where you're going to bring different things to the table depending on which roster you bring, and maybe try and tailor your playstyle to the opponent you're playing, like that's not what this Eelcaster roster does. I don't think it's necessarily what the Amsterdam roster are looking to do either. It's more just, it's nice that we can just slot this player in and they'll do what they're going to do and the team works around them anyway.
Yeah. So it's the official take here at Learner Drivers is that 4-man rosters are cool but weird. So we wouldn't do them, but that's okay. Definite 3-man roster are, of course, the German team that qualified through Qualifier 4. It wasn't Dortmund. It wasn't even OSGG because they didn't play it. It was Engines Stuttgart. And these really had gone under the radar, I feel like, Psycho, all through the 4 qualifiers, just slowly getting better and better. Aki, Mizu, and DNA. By the time this qualifier finished, I thought they looked really strong.
They definitely did, and I had the pleasure of watching them as well, even live casting. And again, this was one of those rosters where I thought coming into this academic year, they were going to be strong, but that was sort of heavily influenced by my own experience. So very similar to sort of the players over on the Portuguese camp for the University Institute of Lisbon. DNA is a player who's also been competing for, well, the best part of 4 or 5 years even. He's been around in the space for such a long period of time. Even if he's not making any headlines, he has been competing, and he is a name that will be known by people in that space. And also Mizu, I also know from just ranked, from years and years of just running into him. He's a player that I recognise, and I know he has strength. So that roster coming into this competition I thought was going to be sharp, right? But they sort of undelivered for me initially, but of course they have improved over time, and again it's just one of these new rosters which needs to have that time to really get to grips with each other.
The storyline of just like the Qualifier 4 teams who've, like, most of the teams that we're talking about here in Qualifier 4 are the teams where, maybe they under-delivered a bit and they came together and now maybe they can deliver, versus the Qualifier 1 teams who just came out of the gate swinging and were like, they're really good and we know they're really good. That's going to be pretty fun in UR Winter. I'm looking forward to actually seeing some of those clashes.
No, I feel the same. It feels like there are teams that can really sort of punch upwards in terms of the teams that are looked at above them, and I think no more so than the team that was the final one to qualify for the main event, Twente. Of course, they didn't play Qualifier 3, so they came in very well respected into Qualifier 4, looking pretty, dangerous. I mean, look at some of these goals by the time they were scoring. Like, their highlight reel, a couple of these goals are crazy.
They are absolutely nuts, and there is something a part of my freestyler brain which just absolutely loves this team, because their connections upfield are just so good and they're just so spontaneous. They just decide to do random aggressive things that no other team would dare do on sort of a live sort of, you're being broadcast in front of an audience. You're going to keep things sharp because you're nervous. Surely that's how you're going to be when you enter this sort of environment. But these guys, they just have so much confidence in each other, and just as a roster, they just seem to click stupidly well.
Am I making it up, or did someone tell me that 2 of them are related?
Yep.
I don't. Are
Yeah,
they?
I mean, because
Yeah.
two of them are brothers.
Two of them
right?
are brothers. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure it's T1 Shot and Daniel Almelo
Yeah,
are both
that's
brothers.
what I was
That's
told, which-
what I've been told. It may be a lie. I'm not
It
sure.
could be a lie.
I hadn't heard that. I'm surprised. I must be sleeping on something. This musty pass as well. They're literal sibling link up, and they're joined by Chronomia, literally on paper probably the strongest player on the roster. If anything, I feel like they shouldn't have. I mean, obviously the qualifier 1 and 2 were so stacked, but like I thought they'd get closer in qualifier 2 than they did.
I like what you said though, just to touch on it again. It's why I think Eelcastle worked last year, and I really like just this team setup of like one really like synergizing duo and then a better player to fill the gaps for them as well around it. I think it works really well instead of necessarily having your best player as part of like your main kind of like attacking duos really works very well as well. There's something about this style of play that really it speaks to me. I like it.
I mean, maybe you can speak on it, Psycho, because in qualifier 2, Twente were swept by Dr. Bowman's Academy Hanover, and then they were beaten comfortably 3-1 in the lower bracket by the Portsmouth Paladins.
Yeah, and again, this was one of these games that I watched back over, and I thought Twente just didn't look themselves to me. They didn't look too sharp, and it was relatively comfortable for Portsmouth to take that win that I watched. And I suppose losing to Dr. Berman in a sweep is not a big deal. They were obviously coming in as some of the favourites to qualify early, and they did so pretty comfortably. So I think they had a difficult run there, but also a sweep against Zurich. That is no easy feat as well, because that Zurich team is stupidly strong on paper as well, and yet getting a 3-0 straight out the doors, even though they didn't end up making it in that qualifier too, is pretty impressive.
I mean, Zurich got bounced by Bath, so I feel like they are one of the many victims of the qualifiers teams that didn't make it, which really are worth talking about. For reference, the final qualified teams listed into the UR main event, of course, in alphabetical roughly. We've got Aalborg, Amsterdam, Dr. Bowman's Academy Hanover, Exeter, Genoa, Hamburg, RUL, of course, Lisbon, Kiel, Kid SC Lawnmowers, Nijmegen B, Nijmegen N, Roehampton, Stuttgart, Technical University Berlin, Twente, and UEA. But the question for me, Nua, from me to you, which team were you most surprised didn't qualify?
Are you asking me for what I would have thought before the first qualifier? Or
I mean, I guess
kind of
Salford don't really
post-qualifier,
count.
right?
Salford don't really count.
Salford don't.
Salford,
But because I'm also looking down and I'm like, Rotterdam before qualifier 1, you're like, yeah, they're a lock, right? Like Rotterdam are essentially the same roster they played at times last year. I mean, like that roster has, looked shaky at times, but new academic year, are they one of the top 16 teams in Europe? Yeah, of course they are. Like, probably they must be, right? They
for
just gotta be.
qualifier 1, I can say for qualifier 1, Rotterdam came in as 14th seed. They were already like kind of in doubt, and it's sad that they even on that standard they sort of fell flat, Psycho.
Yeah, and it's pretty unfortunate for them, but like you say, it's just another one of those teams, and there's buckets of them. And just also looking at the teams that I thought probably should have made it, the one I touched upon earlier in Zurich as well, I thought they were going to be so good just going into it. Toyf and Melox play together all the time. They're like veterans of the Swiss scene. Everybody knows them over there, and if you do play at that sort of level across Europe, you recognise those players as being fantastic ones themselves, and Skyor is a very solid player himself. And it's just, I don't know whether to be disappointed or impressed by the fact that they had to struggle so much, because honestly, it's just insane, the level of depth at the moment. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, they got UEA'd in qualifier 3 when their furthest run. They were just 2 series away, but they did get the UEA treatment. I mean, there is a couple British teams I feel like we need to talk about in the hopes that they would pump up our numbers for qualifying for UR main event. Of course, DMU didn't play the qualifiers, but UWE, full roster, and of course Warwick stand out to me, Nua.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Warwick one as well. I think if you talked about teams that would be most disappointed themselves that they didn't qualify, I think Warwick, watching them play, they just at no point showed that they deserved a spot, unfortunately, in the top 16 across the qualifiers. But at the same time, they would have come in with the expectation that they can do that. We have the expectation. We know they can perform at that level and they're playing well. So a disappointment, maybe a surprise, but just based on the way they were performing, I think like you look at a team like Dortmund, and it's more surprising that they didn't just manage to win one of their 4 qualification series. You know, Warwick, it's a little bit disappointing, is the main thing, I think.
It's I'm just looking at their qualifier 4 run. It was so strong as well. Of course, in the final series, they lost in 3 relatively close games to Stuttgart, where they were ultimately outclassed. It was a shame. I feel like the team didn't really get as much support from the UK as you would have expected, given they were trying to pump up our numbers. But it was harder, I guess, to support UWE. I don't know if you know what happened in their situation, Psycho, but like to not play qualifier 4 because their players basically quit the game. I mean, I guess it's not too dissimilar to the Salford situation, actually.
Yeah, from what I've seen and heard, at least, it's just another one of those situations where there is some slight sort of tensions in terms of expectations, and if there is under deliveries, teams can easily get complacent. And I'm very much wouldn't be, you know, surprised if that was the fate of UWE, really, just having so much expectations to just make it through, to make everything sure that it's running quickly. They weren't really putting in that effort, perhaps, to sort of achieve bigger. It's just sort of an expectation, and that expectation can lead to a lot of complacency.
Yeah, no, I think that's the right take. It's a shame. The only other shame I want to bring up is OSGG not playing the final qualifier and Aarhus not getting a second Danish team to the main event. But that's enough about Europe. I think for now we need to give ourselves some clarity and some perspective, because of course this past week has been the regional and national playoffs in CRL, and we wanted to get someone educated on the matter, even though technically they didn't actually make it to the national playoffs. They were relatively close. This person, of course, will be familiar to everyone who is hopefully here, will have watched the CRL World Championship last season. A player for the home team on home turf, UT Arlington. It's Samba, who will be joining us here on the podcast. He's here. Welcome, Samba. How's this season been? How was Worlds last season? How have these past few months been for you?
Yeah, Worlds was really good. And then we started off the fall season really well, and then we kind of like hit like a brick wall, lost like 4 series in a row, got swept 3 times, even though we thought we were playing like pretty well still. But obviously something wasn't working, and then we lost the playoffs.
Pain.
Yeah.
I mean, that playoff series, it was obviously a bit sad, but like in terms of the perspective in general, like the West, do you think it's the West getting stronger in terms of depth? Is the immediate question I want to ask out off the bat, or is it just like difficult to keep up the performance over time given how strong you were in spring?
I'd say we worked like harder than we did in spring. We practiced, I think, more than any other team. It's just like, yeah, it's gotten way stronger, and we just didn't perform when we needed to. But like, for example, like UNLV, they went to Worlds and they got a better player, and Wellis, they upgraded. Columbia also upgraded with JD. Missouri S&T upgraded with Bumpin. Mizzou got Excels. I mean, so like I'd say a lot of the teams. I mean, Boise got Dirtho. So a lot of these teams got upgrades. So yeah, I mean, the West has gotten better. The East has also gotten better. But yeah, I'd say like we should still be able to be top 2 or 3. We just didn't perform.
I'm going to ask a follow-up to that then and say, look, you're saying the West has gotten better, and obviously the East have gotten better at the same time. We have the recent results from, the Fall Championship, where West actually managed to take the win, Columbia managing to beat out Northwood in that grand final. Do you think with the upgrades that the West has had that there is any chance that that's a repeatable performance? Is the West actually looking to challenge the top of the East at the moment, or was that just Columbia really wanting that win?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely can. I think the West has definitely gotten better, like good enough to where there's more teams now this season that can actually compete with the East. Because last year, I really think it was probably just Columbia from the West. I mean, we could have too. It's just like it's so hard because they're so good. And I think Columbia was like the best shot last year. This year, they're still probably the best shot. But there's a lot of teams now that put up a really good fight. I mean, you saw Ottawa went 4-2 with Northwood. Missouri S&T went 4-2 with Fisher. So I mean, it's we're definitely getting a lot stronger. And it's not just like as one-sided as it used to be.
Yeah, and I suppose I got a question myself as well, and it's sort of in large related to how I saw your team perform at CRL Worlds last year. Well, this year actually, somehow still. That I had the pleasure of going to, and it seemed that you were one of the teams which, on paper, weren't expected to achieve as much as they did, and yet you absolutely seemed to crush it. And I think you narrowly fell to St. Clair's, if I wasn't mistaken. It seemed that was such a good performance and a good showing from you. But do you just think, with the additions of these new rosters, do you think the sort of caliber has been raised for these teams such that it's just going to make it that little bit harder for the teams, even with the most sort of motivation and drive?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, we performed really well at Worlds. I think like St. Clair was like the weakest team we played, and I mean
it was pain.
We just didn't perform. Yeah, I think like the nerves got to us. I mean, they had nothing to lose, and we were like in that position where like we know they have a sub. It's like in your head, like you can't lose this, and their sub, not gonna lie, it wasn't that good. we just didn't adapt at all. Like I knew before the series, I was like, they're just gonna sit back. Like we have to demo and like open up space, and we just didn't do that. We literally just shot the ball at their net. They saved it, shot it, they saved it. They just counterattacked. I mean, and then like your question, yeah, we were just going to keep working harder to get better because the West has gotten way better. You can't just like kind of just run through it now. We went 12-3 in the spring, lost like LSU and Columbia, and then this year we're like 9-6 and lost to some good top teams. So that just shows like how much better it's gotten. And a lot of these teams could have like traded series. Like UNLV's not a 15-0 team to me. I think they got kind of fortunate in some series. So I don't think Boise is going to go 13-2. I think we see them kind of drop a little bit. Hopefully we perform better in spring because we really need that. Either make it off nationals or league play now to make Worlds, and especially like losing those last 4 series of the season really hurt us because now we're like 4 games down from like their league play record because Boise went 13-2. Columbia already made it. UNLV's 15-0. They literally just have to win like 10 games. They're probably in. So we really have to like really perform and get better over this break and work hard.
Yeah,
I mean,
feel
that was a really it was difficult for me to follow that because like this concept of a good team randomly losing to a weaker team isn't something that we've ever really seen in Europe. Like I can't really relate to it all that hard. Like it's quite difficult to even imagine. Like I couldn't see it happening in Europe for sure. No, never.
I mean, never? No, definitely not. I don't know how much you've kept
every
with
week?
the results in Europe. But of course, it's kind of weird, right? With your season just finishing and our main event starting this weekend, it's kind of nice in the sense that we've been able to follow both. I mean, for me, catching up with results and watching VODs in the morning, I like that you highlight Boys. It feels like they really came out of nowhere. Even looking at the rosters at the start of league play, I was like, okay, there's some contenders here. Obviously, I don't have the same knowledge, but then when they put the run together as well, it's kind of strange, and it can feel so momentum based as well, especially when you're looking as a player to aim to make it back to the CRL World Championships with those memories you have of St. Clair. I mean, I casted that series. You're right. They parked the bus. It was prime Mourinho ball. It was painful, and you've got the whole crowd behind you as well. Like the hunger to try and drive you back there is understandable, I guess, because that's what we do it for. Is there like any other teams you're worried about in that regard that you think are like underrated, or is there any overrated teams that stand out to you as well? As in terms of the East, of course, we had Raz from Oakland, who didn't quite qualify the split, of course, in the East, trying to give us the lowdown. It's interesting to see how the community views that conference as well.
Yeah, I'd say like some like underrated teams like Missouri S&T. I actually had them like in my top 4 at the beginning of the season. So like when they were struggling, I was really surprised. But to see them make nationals, I wasn't surprised. Like I wasn't surprised when they beat UNLV. I'm not gonna lie, because like I said, I really don't think UNLV was a 15-0 team. I don't think they were that strong. I think the only ever 15-0 team the West has had, it was Columbia of last year. Like that's the only team I can really think like that team deserves to be undefeated, if anyone. And I'd say like in Boise, a lot of people didn't rate Boise either, which I was confused. Like I feel like some people just don't pay attention at all to the scene outside of CRL. Like I don't want to call it the casters here, but I just feel like they don't pay attention because like at the beginning of the season they predicted like San Diego to 3-0 Boise, and I was watching it, I was like,
San Diego,
I was like,
what?
I was like, there's no way Boise's losing this, and they 3-0'd them. And I was like, people got to do their research, man, because like they're all these crazy predictions that are not
Missouri
even.
S&T. Then the Game 7 in playoffs as well. They could have won against Indian River State.
They could have. That team surprised me, like how far they went. Just considering who they have, But I mean, they seem like they have really good like chemistry is the big thing. Like Slayer's always demoing. Taco Sesh almost scores every single shot, and then Seabass is still pretty good. I wouldn't say he's like as good as he used to be, but he's still a really decent player.
Yeah, I mean, are you confident in that regard that obviously you know the facts? EU didn't win. They did win one series against NA at the CRA World Championship, but like assuming everything were to run the same, you still think there's a good chance NA can shut EU out of playoffs? Because I know we have our opinions on this.
Wait, who did EU beat again at Worlds? I don't remember.
Kiel swept, destroyed Valleyfield, and then the second time they met it went a little bit different.
Oh yeah, that's when Valleyfield came back with like in the last minute, right?
Yeah, I think I know the game you're talking about. Yeah,
that was insane. I honestly don't know. I actually looked at Wikipedia the other day because it was like UniRL popped up on the tab.
Sure.
I was looking at this real quick, and I saw like Hamburg was like Calix and 2 other players now. Like MJzo and Hartman are on the bench now.
Yes, they are.
Yep.
Calix, Nex, and Lee Fox are, at least in my view, it's. I think they're on paper the 3rd best team in the world. I think only Northwood Blue and Fisher have stronger rosters than them on paper, but they're Hamburg. They will not perform to that expectation. That's how I look at it.
I've never heard of either of the other two, man.
That's fair. That's fair. They're 2 high-level bubble players. They're making like close qualifiers.
Who's next? Is that next V? Or no?
No, I think is a different one.
I put it this way: the
both-
casters
yeah.
would probably predict them to get swept by San Diego in the first match of the season.
Because I mean, I see like, I'm in 6-man, so a lot of the EU guys can play NA, and I've never seen any of those guys in my life.
That's fair.
So that's kind of just what goes in my head. That's how to base it off of. Because I also don't follow the EU. Like, I look at like the EU close qualifier stuff, and I've never seen those names either. So like that's why I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to think. And then
I mean, yeah, the only roster really hyped up coming into spring last season was like Berlin, right? This team on paper is 100% better than Berlin.
okay. And Berlin,
Yeah,
I mean, Berlin could have been Stockton too. Like Stockton could have been out literally last place.
I mean,
they got
you feel my
finals.
pain there, given that not a single EU team made it to playoffs, even though the team that EU should arguably have beaten made it all the way to
Honestly,
finals. But yeah,
The fact that Berlin lost to Oakland, it blows my mind as well. Like, I think it's Oakland, but like, Oakland should have never won a series at Worlds. Like, that's just me being honest. I love the guys. Like, I don't know how Berlin lose that. I really don't. They threw.
I mean, I know how it happened. I think we all know how it happened. We saw it. We just don't have to choose to believe it.
No, those memories are gone, man. I do not remember a single thing.
All I remember is losing. My duration on the stage was pretty much, okay, we're gonna win, and then we just lose. We just concede loads, and it's just game over.
I mean, this guy lost to Penn State, but then Penn State looked
I
pretty
did.
good this season.
Yeah.
So it's not that bad, right?
Yeah,
Although
Penn
they
State
were-
almost beat
yeah.
Northwood in the playoffs. It was like Game 7. I mean, they were up in the series as well at one point.
Mm.
I mean, they could have done it. I mean, it seems like a lot of teams are getting closer, and I think some of these bigger teams like feeling the pressure of these other teams. Like they feel, they're like, we can't lose, and it's starting to get to them because Northwood used to just destroy everyone, and now it's starting to get better.
It's one of the things that I brought up, I think, when we had Raz on as well, is the money in esports. I mean, it's like there's a lot of talk, like North American teams are throwing money, they're buying rosters. But like if a European team can put together a very strong roster, my feeling is that the infrastructure isn't in place. Like people are catching up to programs like Northwood because even though there's money in some of these programs, or who else has the roster? The rosters that are Fisher. But there's not necessarily money there going into coaching or facilities or lifestyle coaches to get these guys the best possible version of themselves for competition. Like it's just because the money is there, to me, and I don't know how you feel about this, playing in an environment where it is much more common. Like just because their money is there, the players are there, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're unbeatable if someone can get players together somewhere else.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Samba, we got a couple more questions from viewers who specifically sent in that they wanted to ask you. But all of the PTSD I just got from the World Championship, I want a quick break from it. So I'm just going to say, have you heard of the University of Birmingham? Because they've got a Rocket League team.
No, I have not.
No, okay, that's fine. Well, we've got an update from them anyway. So our reporter's got you on this.
Birmingham had a
2.
point week. Manchester
Not qualify for UR Winter.
thank you, of course, for that update, Madge. It's not been an ideal time for Birmingham. Anytime. Moving on, Samba, we got a question sent in from Subson who said, what do you think EU needs to do to earn more spots at CRL Worlds, or do you think we're forever doomed to only have top 6?
It's like the
I don't like that you
current, like,
laugh.
The immediate laugh.
Samba's
That's a
how
bad sign.
How do I say I want to take spots away from
No.
the EU without
Okay.
offending everyone here?
That was wrong.
Okay, well, I laughed because once you went on the question, it made more sense. But first, I was like, I don't know, like, how are they going to add more? I'm not psionics. Like, I don't choose that. But then you said, yeah. I mean, I kind of think of it like the South American and OCE and MENA stuff or LCS. Like, you kind of just got to show that you're worth the spots. And right now, I feel like you guys have, like, I feel like Portsmouth really let people down.
Yeah, psycho.
Like-
Yeah,
like,
sorry about that.
It's like you're like
Maybe
this.
next time. Oh wait.
Like, I expected to play y'all, and then y'all just lost. And then I predicted y'all to beat UNLV, and then y'all just lost again.
Yeah.
And then your next
So
best team.
glad that we have
decided to-
Psycho here instead of KJ this week.
It was jet lag, okay? It was jet lag, I promise.
I-
That's
I-
the
I
only
do-
reason.
Yeah.
Could be
You
a
got
thing
the
too, because some of y'all showed up really late.
It's true, actually. There was some travel complications. We can cope on
It
that.
didn't reach
part.
us though, so we can't even have that.
Just
excuse.
pretend it did.
I know. But,
I
okay,
mean,
all the
yeah.
negative energy, I absorbed it from all the teams that had to go through like travel problems, and I just
Yeah.
I couldn't perform. Simple as that.
Yeah, I
You
mean, I had to
basically be a
drive.
therapist.
I had to drive like 20 minutes to Worlds. It was really tough.
Yeah, you can get leg cramp from that. You
what a
want to be real
dream.
careful, you know.
This guy. This is. I mean, if it means anything, obviously we have a 16-team main event that follows the same like full regional format.
I saw that.
for-
Yeah,
for our
interesting.
winter. And
Yeah.
Portsmouth didn't even qualify this year.
Yeah, I
That
saw.
tells you-
I
yeah.
saw Psycho wasn't playing. I was like, I didn't know how good their new third was, but I guess if they didn't make, yeah,
For
they're
me,
done for.
it's not too dissimilar to the fact that Stockton didn't even make playoffs in East. You know, it's not like Stockton are that much of a bad team now, but the depth has completely made any shortcomings of theirs like so exaggerated.
Stockton had a lot of internal problems.
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah, that's
Um,
fair.
That was very like shouldn't have happened, and a lot of misunderstanding between two players, and then they definitely should have been a playoff team. That's for sure. It's just they seemed like they didn't care. One of the players, and another player was very mad that another player was not caring. And I mean,
I'm writing
I don't
all
know
this
why.
down. I'm gonna get to deciphering this afterwards. Don't worry.
No,
I don't know
I
why.
mean, it's obvious. If you look into it,
Yeah.
it's very obvious that there were
I mean, the
issues. and that's
one
not the
player that was
case.
mad literally
Yeah.
called out the player in an interview. It's literally on
Yeah, it's
Twitter.
pretty,
It's on Twitter.
it's pretty hard watching, but also kind of entertaining at the same time. But it shouldn't be. It's not the sort of thing you like to see. And that's obviously not the case with Portsmouth, unless Psycho's going to tell us otherwise. If it means anything, Portsmouth forgot to sign up for the last qualifier, so it's kind of their own incompetence.
How do you
but-
do that? No, that would make me so mad. Maybe.
Yeah.
That's why I run the team. That's why I run my team, because I will not let that happen.
Listen,
There's no
I
chance
thought
of a falling out in Portsmouth because like none of them care enough to even sign up for events. How are they going to fall out with each other when there's just this lack of like?
Yeah.
If I speak,
Psycho.
I am in big trouble.
If it means anything, also that they missed the first qualifier because it was Mercy's birthday, so he was out.
That one
doing
is
other things.
absolutely fine. That
Yeah,
one's
that's
okay.
understandable.
I'm
And it was the
happy.
first
That's not
qualifier.
fine. That's not
Yeah.
fine. You
They
haven't.
wouldn't have made it for the first qualifier. They would
I
not have made
appreciate
it for the first
the
qualifier.
UK teams telling us that they're going to be out partying and not showing up for that reason instead of just not showing up after not telling us, which has
Yeah.
also happened in the past.
Yeah, no, that's
No one in
fair.
particular. I mean,
I mean,
I'm sure none of them are in chat right now.
The other question we had, Samba, for you, and we're translated to NA terms because we have a viewer who is liking to collect all of our guests' favorite crisps. So, what is your favorite like flavor of potato chip?
It's crucial information.
No, it actually
There's a
is. No, like,
Better give it
database
away.
built, Samba.
no, we are actually.
I don't eat
They
potato
can-
chips.
Oh,
But if you did,
Probably just cheddar.
okay, you know
cheddar,
what?
cheddar cheese.
I'm gonna that qualifies a vote for cheese and onion, which I respect because I like that.
that he said, and we're just like, all right, we'll translate that back to European for everyone.
I come on this podcast
Just
and
in
some
case
dude's
the
asking
Europeans
me,
didn't understand what cheddar was, just in case.
I mean, you know everything about CRL, but the thing is also about
Yeah,
potato chips.
I've been blindsided by a chip question that's completely gonna ruin my career.
This is the scandal. This is what's going to take down Samba.
Yeah, I mean,
Oliver Twitter.
in fairness, we have Roehampton waiting in the wings, who are an upcoming UK team. Have they replaced Portsmouth? Not exactly quite.
I
So
don't
I'm
believe
wondering, yeah, it's definitely not replacing Portsmouth of last season. But are there any questions you have before we free Samba from potato chip questions, Nua or Psycho?
Come on, hit me with a question. Let's go.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure. I've already asked all the questions I wanted to ask, I think.
Really?
All right, I'm going to ask a single question whilst you ponder, Noah, and that is going to be: how was Worlds last year? Was it any good? Was it good fun? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, yeah.
What was it like?
Yeah.
What was the experience like? Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. I think everyone I met was like really cool. Like there was one person that was like, man, I really hated that guy. You know, everyone was like, you're all swimming together on the first day. You know, Quint was around like a lot. I think Quint was like the most outgoing.
He was everywhere.
new player.
He was everywhere. Yeah.
I remember I had breakfast with him, Comp, Bran, Spoods, maybe Franklin, the coach from Penn State, like on the day of like Sunday, the day before I was playing St. Clair, and like we were just all having breakfast together, just chilling. I probably should have been warming up.
They were making you let your guard down, you'd have known at that
Yeah.
point. Yeah,
I was there, and Comp was freaking out, like Jay's not playing. And I was like, what? He's like, Jay's
Yeah.
not playing, and he's like, you're gonna have a free win. I was like, stop saying that. Let's not say that first off. Like, shut your
Dangerous
mouth.
statement.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But yeah, it was a great time. I mean, it made it better that I could go home afterwards after I lost. And I got to, I just went home, and but yeah, I mean, it was a great time to be around everyone. That's why I want to go back, you know, compete on stage again, wherever it is. Hopefully it's not in Europe, and just so I don't have to change time zone.
I mean,
But yeah, we're gonna work hard. I mean, this is our last semester. Like all of us, we're all graduating. I mean, Ad's already in grad school. But yeah, me and Oliver, you know, we're all graduating spring, so this is it for us. So you know, we got to end on a good note.
I have a question then. So coming out the far end now of your collegiate Rocket League experience, what, like, if you could go and tell someone who's just starting at the other end of that journey, like coming into their first year collegiate Rocket League, what did you say to them?
I don't know. It's work hard. Cause I mean, when I came into the league in fall 2019, I was a random. I was literally 1800 rank B player. Couldn't really do anything cool. Just a bang player, just bang the ball upfield. You know, average is literally 1v3 back in the day. And I had to work really hard for us to, you know, improve because we were not even making playoffs back then, you know. So yeah, work hard when you lose, see what you did wrong, take losses as a learning step. That's why I do every loss. I'm like, I have to get better. That's the first thing that goes in my head. Like, how can I get better? How can I not lose next time? You know, it's all kind of paying off now because, you know, Worlds was like the big thing. I always just wanted to make something. And obviously the way we lost sucked. So now it's even more. I need to make it further. So that's kind of what's, you know, just motivated to do better.
Yeah, I feel that wanting to go out on the high really is just the perfect message, I feel like, for collegiate Rocket League Samba. It's been a pleasure having you on. I do hope you make it back to Worlds, whether it's through West itself or the LCQ, even more
Do
stress.
that. Not
I
LCQ.
pray
Yeah.
we get to see you back there. There's no better example for collegiate Rocket League than you and UT Arlington. Really, it's been a joy having you, and I hope we get to be in touch again soon.
Thank you all. Appreciate y'all having me.
All right, that was Samba of UTA. Make sure to keep up with him. Follow him on Twitter as well. Really, I think the more integrated we can have the UR scene and the CRL scene, the better, as far as I see it, guys.
Yeah, we got to go and steal all their secrets in time for Worlds.
There's that as well, right? But I think just as well as the secrets and the sort of scheming behind the scenes that we're going to have to do to catch up this year, I think last year was sort of just that stepping stone into creating the sort of the blend between the two spaces, if you like, in sort of what was the EURC and also the CRL as well. And the fact that now we've sort of graduated past that and there's definitely, well, more depth across Europe as well. I think it's going to be a task to actually integrate the communities in terms of sort of friendships and communities and sort of the small spaces over that sort of side of things. That's going to be a very important step to actually, closing the sort of gap between them.
I have loved, like, we have some really good international rivalries in EU. I'd love if we reach a point where we actually have a proper intercontinental rivalry between two colleges. I think that'd be sick. Like, we're probably a little ways off. All right, Europe,
It will
catch up.
take.
But
I mean, we already have Kiel Valleyfield, but the Valleyfield team is basically gone. So it's going to take some.
And with only one
historic
event
matches.
a year, it's a little bit tough. But like,
Yeah.
one day, all right. This is a call
I
for
believe.
Psionics to introduce more events as well.
Well, we've had one NA team, or at least NA player in Samba from UTA. So why not welcome an EU team? One we've been seeing a lot about, a very popular team that were picked early on to do incredibly strongly. We're joined by two of them from Roehampton. It is, of course, JSW and Yotam. Guys, how has this been? It's great to see you at the facility. What has this real sort of baptism of fire at times been in, of course, European University Rocket League as well as UK?
It's been great. I've loved playing. I've loved playing. And yeah, I don't know much else to say.
One thing I didn't do, like when I came to uni, I didn't realize how much games we'll be playing. Like we're playing like 6 times, like 5 times a week, like if we're including like scrimming and like coaching, and there's so much.
And this is immediately the point where you can no longer show your parents this interview. Is that right?
That's true. How much time do you spend at the facility though? Because I see you're there together, and I think it's so cool to be able to. I mean, I've seen the meme about you sleeping, and I understand you don't actually live there, but like, seriously, how much time?
It may not be a meme.
Oh,
we had a little bit to do. That's all right. Don't worry about it.
We've got plenty of videos and both.
I mean, I gather it had to be something serious, given that there had to be a disclaimer added that you don't actually live and sleep there all the time. But I guess we won't expose them secrets. I think the obvious thing to touch on is how relieving was it to finally have qualified for UR Winter, of course, at the final qualifier last Sunday?
I was really nervous if we weren't going to make it. Like,
I knew we'd make it.
The first 2 were like horrible, right? We were so bad, and then the third one we lost to Portsmouth, and then we like lost in game 5, like the qualifying game. I was like, and we finally like picked up our form, and then obviously we made it, so it was good.
I was never in doubt.
I'm glad that someone was never in doubt, because I don't think us watching were as necessarily confident. But I mean, like, do you guys feel because you were winning domestically the entire way through all these qualifiers, right? Like, it was going really well at home. Did you feel that you were playing below level internationally? And if you did kind of feel that way, like, did you identify a reason for that?
I think we were playing like below our level, like domestically as well. Like we haven't lost a series in like UK stuff, but we haven't been winning comfortably. Like I feel like we haven't been playing that well, but it has clicked in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, we had like after we lost to Portsmouth in the Euro qualifier, the third one. I think like we had like a coaching session, and like we've changed something, and like now I feel like it's really working for us. So.
Yeah, so it's not that you were underperforming in EU versus like playing well at home. It's just that all of the UK was underperforming relative to you as well.
Yeah, we were playing bad. Yeah, we had some issues as well.
I'm just reading the subtext here, making sure that it's all out in the open, getting those quotable moments.
Yeah, I was going to follow up on that point, and I was going to ask: is there anything in particular that you feel has very much changed within your playstyle, whether it be just a small sort of role change in players or something of the sort?
Yeah, so I think like when we first started, like I think a lot of it was like playing around me, and like whatever, like Jacob would just do whatever like I'll tell him to do. But like instead, if I'm starting to play around Jacob, and I'll let Jacob do all the stuff, and he creates a space for me. And I think that's been working out a lot more, and Crisis is good at filling in the gaps too. So
I mean, you talked about playing around Yotam. I'm just gonna point out that one of our viewers did actually get a screenshot from the qualifying series, the qualifying game. In fact, I don't actually know if we have it, but I can read off it as I do have it on record here. So, JSW, Jacob, you put up 130 points.
That's
points
good.
And everything.
That's good.
Crisis,
Yeah.
of course, 116. He was a little bit more modest.
Yeah.
Yotam, you put up 763 points, accounting for 3 times your teammates' score combined. Was that just a choice you made to be more aggressive, or was that the sort of will to get it over the line, sweep Dortmund, and finally get into this event?
So what?
I should answer this, Yotam.
Okay.
Sorry,
Me
I
and Crisis.
didn't want to stir anything here.
Look,
It's just
me
a
and
sad
Crisis,
Yeah.
we do so much for you. You know, we're doing demos, we're doing bumps, off the ball play,
Yeah.
stealing boosts.
Yeah.
We're doing all of this. I'm like, yes, you get the points. But it's a team game, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think that game in particular was like one of the best individual performances I've seen in recent time, to be honest. I just think it was... I was casting that match, and if you listen to it back, I think the only word that left my mouth in the whole last 5 minutes was just Yotam, and that was pretty much it. It was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
What I did do, right? I've never ever drank anything other than water my whole life. I was so scared. I was like, "What do I do to make myself like alert?" So I got I drank coffee for the first time. Right? I was off the balls.
What?
Never had caffeine before, and he did a double espresso shot.
My favorite lore drop about a player ever. That's
I love
great.
that
That's
so much.
incredible.
Never drank anything but water ever.
Yeah.
Discord.
Discord has
Discord?
died.
Discord
Oh,
died
no.
temporarily again, but that's okay. We'll be back. We were, of course, focusing on one player in Yotam, which is, fair in regards of how they qualified. But in terms of questions that were sent in, this one's actually for Crisis, who I know is watching in chat. So this was from a person called JSW, and it's a question for you, Crisis. Were you at Roehampton last year? If so, why didn't you check to see if there was a Rocket League team?
Oh, Crisis should be here, but he doesn't like to come in. It's sad. But yeah, we were planning to do this on Monday, and he would have been here for that. But yeah, Crisis is the same year as me. We're both year 2, and he just didn't check to see if there was a Rocket League team last year. He could have got a scholarship, but he didn't want it apparently.
Nice. I mean, it's not like there was another player at Amsterdam who did that or anything. No, I mean, they
Not
would
at
never
all.
do that. Teams not having the awareness. I mean, it's okay. Speaking of Amsterdam, actually, JLT submitted a question for you guys. It's a bit of a mean question. I don't know what he's talking about. He says, why did it take so long for you to ice up? Have you finally figured out what was going wrong, or was the last qualifier just free? Which I think is a bit of a mean question. I don't know how you found the rumble and tumble of the qualifiers and what you think about the European pack in general.
Oh, we've been wanting to talk about this. We threw the first 3 qualifiers. It wouldn't have been fun if we did it in the first one. So
Yeah.
we're all about the content here, and if we did it in the first one, we couldn't have all the content from the previous, like the last 3 qualifiers. So yeah, that's the exact reason why we didn't qualify.
Right. What he said.
Can I actually ask a question? Slightly a follow on from that, but does pivot a little bit. You've gotten to play a lot of teams because it did take you off work. Are there any teams in Europe that you're looking forward to playing?
I mean, I want us to play against Hanover and Hamburg and see how we do. Like, even if they are better, we'll see what happens, because I just want to see what the level is like.
It's you've got bored of beating the UK teams. Is that what you're saying?
Played too many Warwicks and UEAs. So.
I mean, it's fair enough. There was actually a question from dual admin Sigmoid, of course, of NSC Annual. You said, we've seen historically that teams have struggled to hold their form over a whole domestic season. Do you expect to have a harder time heading into the playoffs of NSC, or do you think it's still going to be free?
Well, it's definitely not going to be free, but like our first game, I think we're able to win, and then it comes down. We play Salford or UEA, I think, in the second one, and then after that it'll be Kiel, and then after that it's the final. So, like, we're doing quite well against all of them that I've listed off so far in like scrims and stuff. It's just on the day, I guess.
Okay, that's fair. I know that there's an elephant in the room here with this segment, and the podcast in general, in the sense that it is our duty to reveal the round 1 matchups for the main event that's starting this weekend. Which, I'm just going to give a chance to Nua or Psycho to ask you anything else before we move on to that. Though I would ask, are there any teams you're hoping to play or not to play?
I really want to play Kill.
Okay.
Like, we haven't played Kill yet, and I really want to play them to see how we match up. Because we scrimmed them, and like, if we play like we did in scrims, we should be fine. But I feel like Kill are one of those teams that, like, when it comes down to it, when the pressure's on, they perform. So yeah.
Okay. Is there anything, Psycho? I'm going to ask a... Yeah, sorry?
This podcast has rotted my brain. I fully thought you were winding up to ask them about crisps.
No, I mean, actually, we can ask you about crisps in the
That is
meantime.
important.
What are your favourite flavour of crisps, guys? Actually, we do... At some point, we have
It's
to. I was going to
crucial.
save it to the end, but we can ask you now.
The McCain's like steak. Is it steak? Is that what
Are we allowed to mention McCain's?
McCoy's?
I mean, if they want to sponsor us, that's completely fine. Go with whatever brand you want. McCoy's are of a strong smell. I like McCoy's, but I think they're a bit too much.
Yeah.
Are McCain's and McCoy's
What are your favourite? What's your?
Aren't they the
I'm a
family
I
from
do love sweet
Shakespeare?
chili, like Thai.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
That's
that
up
is the
there
correct
too.
answer.
That is up there too.
McCain's Thai
Yeah.
sweet chili is the answer.
Yeah. Thai sweet
Anything
chili are
else is
kinda-
factually incorrect, I think.
Kinda.
It's so good.
Yeah. I mean, Sin likes Pringles, but he's a
Oh.
little bit of a strange guy.
I
and gonna
once
have
saw a
strange-
man his mouth to the point he started bleeding eating salt and vinegar Pringles. Montana
Okay,
is dying. Send help! Send help! I'm falling into the void!
Let's get this straight, Noah. You once saw a man.
I saw him!
Incredible
He was
information.
real.
Sorry, I can't. Yotam and JSW. The main thing coming into the Swiss, as you know, as it follows the same full RLCS regional format, is the teams are seeded 1 through 16. And those... Sorry. Those will, of course, be the tiebreaker between teams that have the same record and the same game difference, at least, say, after round 1. Out of the 16 teams, obviously you qualified through qualifier 4, but where would you rank yourself out of 16, just for context? Maybe right now, and also where you think you could be.
Like, I think confidently top like 10. If we went even like, I want to make like top 6.
Okay.
Like, I think that's pretty achievable after looking at like who's there. But it's all about how we perform on the day. So
I agree. I think it's achievable. Even just only having watched you for a limited amount of time, I think there is a little bit of a margin after the top 4 that we're yet to see whether they will, of course, live up to. But I think we're ready to reveal your first matchup in the sense.
Okay.
I can confirm that you come into the Swiss stage. Then this, ladies and gentlemen, will be our first confirmed matchup. And then afterwards, we will start to roll through the matchups, although we will probably kick the poor lads from Roehampton out of the building first. But your matchup, because we want your thoughts on it. You come in as the number 12 seed out of 16. You play the 5th seed in round 1, which are the Kit SC Lawnmowers. You will have German competition, who of course were at the World Championship last season. How do you feel about that matchup?
I think I feel pretty confident. I've never played them before, but
Yeah, we haven't scrimmed them at all, have we?
like I can only go off of like how if I've ever seen them in ranked or anything like that. But yeah, I feel like pretty confident.
For Crisis in chat, it's Pads, Matty, 10, Loris Raptor, because Crisis doesn't know anything about UniRL,
That's okay.
and I have to tell him everything.
He shows up and plays, and if he does do that, it's a bonus given last year. And you know what? I respect that. In terms of Kit's results, qualifying, if it's any reassurance, when Salford still existed, Salford actually swept them in qualifier 1. So that may give you some confidence. Kit were, however, able to beat UEA. They did drop a series to Genoa, in fact, in Series 1. in qualifier 1, sorry. However, in qualifier 2, they qualified beating Portsmouth, Lisbon, and of course Doran's Nimmer in a sweep. The team that did sort of do you a bit of not a solid in qualifier 3 beating you. Actually, no, it was actually Doran's Boxfish you lost in series 5 in game 5, I believe. So I mean, Kit, even last year, they're the same roster. They're highly experienced, having played with each other for over a year now. In fact, maybe even 2. I can't recall. They're still a team where you don't really know how far they can go. As you may have been aware, having watched last year, they came into EURC 2022, RIP EURC, but the 40-team tournament that, of course, has the same format this spring, they were the 21st seed, and they came 4th. Obviously, some can say they had a bit of a fortunate run with Liverpool, John Moores, and Kiel both using their subs in the matchups in playoffs. However, they made it to Wales, they performed respectably, and they've come into this season still very consistent. Now, I don't know how much you watch of Uniliga, but that will be your round 1 matchup. So do you feel like it's important to start strongly, given it's a Swiss format, or do you think are you okay with a loss then rebound because of all the memes about, lose your first game in Swiss to get a Mickey run?
I mean,
I think so you want to win, but if we lose,
Yeah.
you've got like a safety net there that you can lose another.
Yeah.
I had a random sort of off-topic almost question as well, and I was going to ask, what sort of experiences have you had against particularly German competition and German teams, generally speaking, in terms of scrims and past results against German teams? How might they have fared?
have we?
I think we've only scrimmed Dortmund. I think.
No. We scrimmed Dr. Boom, whatever her name is, Boom.
Dr. Boomen's Academy, Hanover.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Casually, we do just say Hanover, but we shouldn't because the University of Hanover is actually a different university. But yeah.
Oh yeah.
How did that go?
Scrimming with Zedo and PZY.
No, it was Jazzy and Chaos.
Oh, so technically we haven't scrimmed them.
I see. We have rumours that those players may be involved come spring, so that's of course even more exciting news for the German competition, which I think is where my next curiosity leads, and like how important is it to you that the UK does well in Europe, because it feels like we've sort of regressed a little bit compared to the competition.
Yeah, I think especially with Salford now losing Huge, like there's only us, Exeter and Kiel. Maybe UEA.
Rip UEA. I mean, 1 per qualifier it was.
Yeah. But UEA are gonna do well, maybe. I don't have the most faith in UEA.
It sounded very optimistic for UEA, and if you knew anyone about who I was replacing today in KJ, I would be thoroughly upset that you didn't list UEA in those 4.
I didn't say they were gonna get like knocked out like in last position.
Right, that's better. It's a start. So they're at least above last. That is good. KJ, I hope I've done you proud.
Yeah, I mean, UEA, if it means anything, as you will find out, you are just higher seeded than them by 1. So in theory, you are the 3rd highest team seeded from the UK going to the main event. As I'm sure you may be curious at the other matchups that you will learn in the coming minutes. Of course, I gather we've got a dead Nuralaic with us, unfortunately, so you won't be able to ask him anything. But it's just nice, really, to have you here and have you nice in the room. I don't know if there's anything you want to ask us. Probably not. Ultimately, we've got Psycho here instead of KJ, though, so that's a big upgrade on actual knowledge.
I was say, Psycho, do you enjoy the commentating and that stuff now instead of playing?
Oh yeah, it's wicked. It's awesome. It's exactly what I dreamed of in terms of filling the gap, because the whole competitive side of things was my massive hobby for all of 4 or 5 years of trying to improve on that. And now I've got a brand new playing field to actually explore some creativity and learn loads of stuff. So it's good fun. Yeah, it's great.
It's sweet, nice.
Yeah. I had another random question for you guys actually that I didn't ask earlier, and now I've just remembered it, so I'm going to ask it. I was curious to know what the sort of environment is like sort of outside of Rocket League as well for you guys as a team. Are you actually connected in sort of friend circles, or is there social events surrounding your university at all?
I mean, I have a social life. Yotam's social life is in here for
need to
the
admit
most part. I mean, I've been loving it here at uni. I've got a great group of friends outside like the Rocket League scene. There's constantly events and stuff I go to, and like even within esports, like we have such a big sort of esports society here. Like I've got loads of people. Everyone's really nice, and yeah, it's been great here.
That's nice. Yeah, I kind of got beaten to the punch by Psycho. I wanted to ask what studying at Roehampton was like in general. And I assume if you live on campus or in the facility, then constant tube strikes probably aren't really a huge issue. But like as a university in general, like what can you tell us about it as well? Because it's such a pioneering one in the sense of offering esports scholarships, certainly in the UK.
Yeah, it's really good. Like Crisis is off campus, but me and Yotam both live on campus, and I really like it here. It's the only campus university in London, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like the campus is really nice. We have like a massive green space. The library's really good, and like the actual esports scholarship is like really useful. Like for me, I want to go work in esports after this, so like it's given me so many opportunities. We've had Semper Singularity Power Bootcamp here, Power Bootcamping here in a couple of days actually. So that'll be cool when they come back. And like I've made so many connections, I've got the experience, and like hopefully once I finish my studies, I'll be able to use everything that I've got from this scholarship and being at Roehampton to have a career in esports.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect answer. Really, I think the perfect thing that could round out that CV, of course, would be an appearance at, say, the CRL World Championship to really be a marquee sort of in the centre. I don't know how. I mean, obviously, I know you're unbelievably motivated to reach that. To qualify in winter, you'd have to win the main event. But like, how confident are you in that, guys? Or at least, how confident are you can make it, into one of the 6 spots come spring?
I think like there's a chance. Like I wouldn't want to say like we're confirmed there, but like if we perform well on the day and like we keep working throughout the year, like I think that we could make it.
That's fair. I like it. I think it has been very nice having you on. I do have an obligation to reveal the rest of the matchups, myself and Psycho, not Nuit because he's dead. So, Psycho, if there's anything you have, whilst we've of course, for context, effectively messed around Yotam and JSW in the sense that we were meant to have this done on Monday, as you may have been aware, and you guys have come on at short notice happily. We'll do Wednesday instead. And it's just nice to get insight about you guys and Roehampton as well, coming in as a completely new face team into this year, making it into the main event, and I hope you have a big impact in the main event too.
Yeah, I have one thing to say actually before we go.
Sure. Oh, you have a slight...
Yeah, we've got a big announcement that's going to be coming out soon. I'm not sure exactly when, but by the end of this week, make sure you check our Twitter, and there's going to be a big announcement. I think it's going to be... hopefully it's the start of something for like Uni Rocket League. And yeah, I don't know if you want to say anything, but
say the same, yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting for us, and hopefully it might lead to more stuff within the scene.
I mean, that is exciting.
That is absolutely fantastic, yeah. And as I was going to say that one of the biggest things that I think we can really give you props for, sort of as a university and as a team, is just how much you care about the stuff that you're doing at the moment and competing. It seems that you are the most driven, the most motivated team in the UK by miles. Now, I feel like it's almost unfortunate the way you were portrayed before this academic year began, in sort of being raised as this, you guys are going to demolish the competition, you're going to absolutely annihilate anything. And I think there is a lot of teams who will be looking at you and sort of considering you guys the bad guys almost as a result of that alone. But I think just because of, the announcement that you say you're going to have next week and all the hard work and efforts you've put in, I think it's telling of your personalities as well. And I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, you heard it here, guys. Make sure to keep an eye on at Roehampton RL and at Esports Row as well, as this has been, of course, at Roehampton RL. It's even there on the overlay as well. Yotam and JSW, thank you for joining us, and Crisis as well in spirit we will move on to reveal the first round Swiss matchups for the UR main event next to Cool Difficulties. Please stand by. As I guess we can sort of take it in turn, Psycho, and give quick thoughts up on these matchups as I get people. They want to find these out, and they will be officially released in time. We've got Kit versus Roehampton, of course, 5 versus 12. But why don't you give us 1 versus 16?
Well, 1 versus 16, I believe, is going to be Hamburg versus Twente. And I think initially my feelings on that are going to be that that's a bit more of a one-sided matchup in that Hamburg sort of are these new titans that we expect to be absolutely demolishing the competition. But considering they did qualify for UR Winter so early as well, I think there's a little bit of unexpectedness in terms of we don't know how comfortable that result's going to be. So I'm interested to see how that series go from, well, that perspective alone, really.
Yeah, it's I don't know how much hope I held out for Twente in that matchup against Hamburg. I mean, you think about the roster, how high their ceiling is, you know, with T1 Shirt and with Daniel Almelo, the brothers, and of course Chrono. They do, ultimately, they've qualified. They do have a chance. I just don't know what percentage I would put it out. They can throw Hamburg off their game if they peak, I feel like. It has to be an absolute peak.
Yeah, it has to be more than a peak. It literally needs to be a perfect series for me as far as I'm concerned, because I feel like even though the sort of gap is being reduced in EU Rocket League for the collegiate stuff, in terms of, you know, that top 4, that top 6, and how they match up with the rest of the competition, in terms of individual names, I think if you're really shooting at the top level where Hamburg is sitting, on an individual levels, the experience that these players have is second to none. They just have incredible amounts of competency on the field in international competition. So if Twente can even get close, if they can manage to take even a game, I think that's a very, very strong result for them.
Yeah, there's no need to remind everyone that the Hamburg's qualifying series, they were playing with MJ instead of Calix, and they still sort of brushed aside Amsterdam, who of course still qualified in qualifier 1. I mean, 2 versus 15 is actually a same nation matchup, which I'm usually not a fan of, but ultimately this is what we got. It is Berlin who are the second seed. Of course, Tigri and Gnag still there with high roll. They're playing against Engines Stuttgart. Now this one, I mean, for me, it still feels as a little bit similar to the first, but there's definitely, I don't know, Stuttgart did look really good, but Berlin are obviously at seemingly a different caliber.
Yeah, I think this is a similar scenario to the previous matchup we just spoke of, but I think the lines get a little bit more blurred here. I think Stuttgart definitely have a chance. It's going to be an uphill battle given the nature of Berlin and the experience that they've had as a roster, even being with High Roll sort of ahead of time, like years ago. He's been around for a long time, that player, so they know how each other operate, and it's very much just a well-oiled machine, Berlin, still to this day, even with that small change. And Stuttgart, they are strong individual players with experience. It's just a question of whether they can sort of, you know, give Berlin a run for their money.
The exciting thing about that matchup is it will be available to be watched on the Uniliga stream come Saturday, but the next matchup is one that will be on the Uni Rocketeers stream, and it's one we saw back in spring.
Yep, Kiel versus Aalborg, and that's going to be... Oh, I think that's going to be a very spicy matchup, because I've not seen Kiel play in a very long amount of time, and I think that's an interesting thing, because Aalborg is one of the teams that I've watched for the most of late in these last sort of 3-4 weeks. I've watched them compete constantly, and I've been able to watch them grow as a roster as well. So I think definitely for Aalborg, they're going to be in with a much closer shot than perhaps they were last time around.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, always, I feel like, talking about Aalborg. Of course, the past matchup in spring, old Aalborg with Gib Maestro, Kiel beat them to qualify for the World Championship in the lower bracket. I'm pretty sure it was a 4-0 sweep, in fact, but there were 3 overtimes in that. And it's new Aalborg. It's new Aalborg that seem less consistent across the qualifiers, but super consistent in that they went unbeaten in the Wildcard League, which when you look at the level of competition in the Wildcard League, Psycho, that's
pretty good.
That's quite a feat.
It's pretty good, and it's teams the likes of Pesto and IUL, who everyone sort of pitched up as being these new potential dark horse powerhouses sitting around that sort of maybe 6th seed even potentially in many people's minds before this academic year began. And Aalborg, for as much as they've been criticised for making it a little bit more difficult than it perhaps could be to make that sort of UR winter qualification, I think the results that they've had in the Wildcard League alone in terms of their improvement sort of speaks for itself.
Yeah, that is, of course, the 3 versus 14th seed matchup in Kiel and Aalborg, respectively. The next matchup, the number 4 seed, I'm sure surprising no one, is Amsterdam. They will play against UEA on this channel here. My stream will be the B or C stream, however you look at it. Amsterdam against UEA, that's a historic matchup.
It absolutely is a historic matchup, but I think things are going to be slightly twisted around this time around because Amsterdam is a stupidly strong roster on paper, and although I think they have had their shaky moments so far, I think it's fair to say they are still an unbelievably talented roster. And UEA, again, I've seen their recent form in terms of, well, especially during that Warwick series just a couple days ago. Warwick looked quite strong and UEA was still able to deal with it relatively comfortable. They were completely controlling of the play, and it seems that them as a roster have improved a lot as well recently.
Yeah, I'm excited for that series to see if UEA can pull out any of their classic antics. For context, of course, that lower series in EURC 2022, very different Amsterdam, but they were eliminated by UEA with Eclat Mackers without a brake button, without the ability to slow down or reverse at will. They did still win that in Game 7 somehow. Of course, we do have the Kit versus Roehampton matchup in 5 versus 12. That will also be on the Uniliga stream. Now, we were talking to Roehampton about that. I don't know if you have any quick thoughts about that matchup personally, now that we can say it behind their backs.
Well, I think that matchup has the potential to be the most exciting of the bunch in terms of just looking from a viewer perspective. I think Roehampton have made improvements recently. It feels like I'm just saying that about every single team at the moment, just, you know, off the cuff. But I think that is honestly just the state of affairs. These teams haven't been given too long to work around each other. And finally, we're seeing these teams operate in a more comfortable way. And for Kits, obviously being sort of new, well, old titans of Europe, they made CRL last year. Their roster remains largely unchanged, and so their performances, from our perspective, we can't have those twisted. We just have to presume that they're firing on exactly the same cylinders. So I think it's going to be a very interesting matchup, that one.
Yeah, I think obviously they said themselves they're relatively happy with the draw, and I think almost everyone would be to see Kit on the other side of the draw. It's just that is so often the pitfall with Kit.
Yeah,
I feel like
absolutely.
they're never a team that you're sad to have to play against, but they are so reliable, and for them to beat Roehampton wouldn't be surprising at all. Yeah, certainly from the UK, we look at that matchup and you're like, go on, Roehampton, you know, that's definitely a winnable series, but it'd be exciting to see it play out. There is another UK team, of course, who come in as the number 6 seed, and that's Exeter, who, as it turns out, are going to be playing without Misery. They're going to be playing with Teamstar, I believe, so a lot more vulnerable where you think they'd be on paper. They play against Nijmegen B. That is, of course, Doran's Boxfish. We are calling them B and Nijmegen M, respectively, to make things less confusing. So, of course, you got to realize they actually qualified later, with Doran's Boxfish being Anya, Mark, and Jayron. This is such a complicated matchup for me, at least, Psycho, especially given the sub situation now.
Yeah, and I think initially I would favour Exeter, but only slightly. And I think with the introduction of a substitute, I honestly believe that Misery is a powerhouse when it comes to offense, and just his pure pace on the field is ridiculous. He's very, very quick in the air and a talent on the field, but with Teamstar, who is also a very strong player, I'm not sure he'll be delivering those same qualities as Misery. And I think he's almost a polar opposite player in terms of his play style, so I'm not sure how that's going to fit for Exeter, and it'll make life a little bit more difficult. But Nijmegen Boxfish, I think, as a roster, Ania and Jayron, 2 incredibly competent players. And last time I watched, I believe, Marcitio in the third, he was also very strong as well. So I think I'm only just going to be favouring Nijmegen Boxfish for that match, maybe.
Yeah, I think only just is a fair way to put it as well. I know some people might write off Exeter given the sub situation, but Teamstar has played for them before and played with pads, of course, and Exeter are not unused to suddenly becoming without Misery. So the fact he's not there is fine, and they're just such a underdog team anyway. Like, they won't really care about the situation, and I mean, I know I differ from you on this point, but I'm just yet to be convinced by Nijmegen Boxfish. Like, they seem like a team that has such a high ceiling, but could lose to almost anyone in this main event.
Yeah, and I think they're one of the teams that is very much plagued by still not quite understanding how is the best way to play around each other, I guess. They haven't found comfortability, they haven't found rhythm, and I think that's showing of every time I've watched them on broadcast as well. So I think it's just a question of time for them, and I know obviously their internal dynamics have shifted to have these two teams sort of break apart from one another, and obviously that's going to change the way things are operating as well. So I'm not surprised they are in the situation they are, but they definitely have more to give, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. We got the 4 teams left, of course, to place in terms of their opponents. You can, reveal the 7 versus 10 matchup, and in turn, those, of course, can figure out the final 2 teams for 8 versus 9.
Yeah, and Dr. Berman Academy in Hanover versus Genoa. I think that's going to be... it's going to be tasty because Genoa are capable. They are incredibly capable, and that's all I can really say, all I can really praise this roster for, but I'm still yet to see consistency from them as well in the likes of the UR Wildcard League. I'm not sure they've had consistency there. They've been beaten by their Italian counterparts and also by Aalborg as well, and just looking at Hanover themselves, I think they are the stronger team on paper there.
Yeah, Hanover... Certainly, I feel like with System on keyboard as well, just a really strong 3-man roster where only when he was trying to figure out controller did it feel like there was some trust issues there. But now I'm starting to get excited more by Hanover when I watch them. But that's why that match is so exciting. It's going to be on the main Uni Rocketeers stream as well, because Genoa, we know how strong they can be. As that ultimately leaves us to the final matchup of round 1 to go over, and it is the other Doran's Nijmegen Nimmer coming in at the number 8 seed, and of course my favorite team, no bias of course, the Portuguese at Institute University of Lisbon coming in as number 9.
Yeah, and I think this one definitely favours IUL, at least from my personal perspective. I just think the last time I watched this team, they were just so aggressive to such an extent where they had a grip on the opposition's back third for 3/4 of the game almost, it felt like, at least, and the only real spells they give their oppositions are counter-attacking opportunities, and that is where IUL seems to be incredibly loose. I'm not sure they're a defensive team by any means of the word, but Doran's Nimmer are they're just a figure in the community at this point that just do well, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win, honestly.
Yeah, Doran's Nimmer as well. It's so easy to sleep on them, given how comfortably they sort of just walked into one qualifier like, our uni told us we should probably play in this. It is Sane, Juice Bear, and SK, and they just went through no problem. They were such a well-rounded unit, and that is, that's anyone's guess. As much as I love IUL, they have seemingly beaten and lost to almost all the teams around them in seeding here in the main event. So that one I'm actually going to have on this channel as well. So we're covering 6 of the round 1 games. There's only 2 that will be off stream. That's Hamburg Twente and Exeter against Nijmegen Boxfish. If you had to pick one, it was your favorite before we move on, Psycho, what's your match of the day?
Match of the day, in terms of the one that I would want to watch most as a spectator, would be that sort of Roehampton versus Kit affair.
Okay.
I think
you go with that. Yeah.
I think that just on paper has the capability to be such a close matchup, because the thing that I see in both of these teams, which is almost very similar to one another, is just how they approach the play so similarly in their defensive nature. These teams don't tend to make mistakes. They're usually forced into it just by really sitting back and not really delivering much on the offensive front. But I think it makes for a game which is going to be very solid from both teams, probably low scoring as well, and I think that makes for a very tense matchup as well.
Yeah. I agree, actually. We're going to have too many places to look all at one point, as I think we can move on to the final Q&A here of the episode. I thank you for helping cover the death of Nua. That's not a Q&A. The first Q&A question came in from JLT, which I think is a very interesting question. I mean, Amsterdam, of course, probably not an answer to this. It's which team will be the biggest wild card, has the biggest upset potential, but also which team might be the most overrated or vulnerable.
Oh, I think for me, it's easier to say what the biggest wild card and the biggest upset potential would be than the one which is going to be the most overrated, perhaps, because I think teams at the moment are being rated for a reason, and it feels almost criminal to say otherwise. I think, especially from the UK teams at the moment have been overrated. I think it's fair to say so far this academic year, generally speaking, I think the likes of Warwick, for example, which may be undelivered on expectations, the likes of also Roehampton as well, in making that winter qualification a lot more difficult than it could have been, would be my picks for that. But I still can't really think of one that's going to be sort of a dark horse, potentially. I think IUL are still my choice there, but it's by very thin margins, maybe.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I will say IUL for potential wildcard team, but I also think Nijmegen Boxfish, which I guess you wouldn't say as much as a wild card because you already think they are really good. But if they do capitalize on Exeter's situation and get off to a strong start, in terms of the mental game, obviously the Swiss is a huge deal. We're playing 3 rounds of it in one day. It is significant in that sense that you can put yourself in a great or terrible position depending on your expectations. And it's ironic that JLT asked this question. I feel like one of the most, I mean, they're not overrated in my eyes, but I think they're vulnerable is Amsterdam. If they get off to a poor start, even against UEA, if it's closer than they'd like, I still think they'll probably win the series. But Series 2, they could, if they drop games, find themselves against, say, a Hamburg or a Berlin early, fall back onto 1-1. How does that team respond after a loss? Because we haven't really seen that other than the loss to Hamburg in qualifiers.
I mean, the psychological element of the game is so present and so massive when it comes to team performance, but that's one thing that we can't really sort of pick out from sort of a spectator point of view. And I think for a team like Amsterdam, it's going to be more possible for them to fall into unrest, and that's mainly just due to the players on the roster and their personal expectations. And I think if your expectations can be knocked, that's a very heavy blow to not only confidence, but your mentality, generally speaking. So I think a roster like that, as you say, has a bigger potential to fall if things go off to a poor start, if you like. And I think those are going to be the most momentum-driven teams as well.
I mean, there's the other question I want to ask from Q&A before a final question that we are going to be answering. We will, of course, be predicting our top 4 for the main event, as I know Sigmoid has gotten a prediction sheet up in UR General. But Vex wanted to ask, and I think a lot of people wanted this asked, Psycho, is what do we think about Bournemouth's plan in Qualifier 4 of showing up just to try and defeat Warwick and then forfeit the next round?
I think that's the most Bournemouth thing I've probably ever heard, and I wouldn't be surprised if that singular game against Warwick would have been turned into a drinking game as well, just given the nature of this roster. It just seems that they're in it to have fun, so I think that's both a credit to them and an immense disappointment to me.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was ultimately happy Warwick won that series, as I just don't think I could have handled the community outbreak and this strange anti-Warwick sentiment that there was. But there was something funny about the fact that Bournemouth had DQ'd down there and were like, oh, we're playing Warwick, let's play. Maybe they just wanted the good practice, I don't know. But it's not the sort of thing, it's not the sort of thing we see often.
No, and I think there are going to be some teams which are more driven to just sort of win everything and make their personal improvements, and there are also going to be those teams that exist purely to have a good time as well. And I think if you point fingers at rosters across the history of sort of Uni Rocket League, at least in the UK, you can probably pinpoint Bournemouth as probably having the most fun of any of those uni teams, and that is what it's all about as well. You have to sort of balance the fun element and also the professionalism when you're up in these big competitions, and making sure that it still retains its competitive integrity if you take it the wrong way as well.
All right, well, that leads us to predict our top 4 from UR Winter. Now, I can't deliver. I need to do like a full prediction tomorrow or something to see where I end up with teams in the Swiss, because Newer Psycho has gone with the top 4 seeds: Hamburg, Berlin, Kiel, and Amsterdam, which I think on paper is a super safe bet. But I think that means they all have to end up in separate quarterfinals.
Yeah, I still don't know how the Swiss is going to pan out and what bracket will be left after, but I think in terms of the teams where I would list them just in terms of almost like a power rankings, I think the top 4 seeds is still generally the way to go, because I think there's just such a big divide between the 4th seed at the moment, or the 4th best, wherever you'd like to power rank it, and whatever falls underneath that. I think there's a massive chasm maybe between 5 and 10, of which any number of teams could fill. It's just a massive question mark on who.
Yeah, I mean, I look at all the teams, other than maybe Hamburg, and I think they can lose to any. Even looking at Kiel and Amsterdam, and Berlin, I look at almost all the teams in the main event, other than maybe Twente and Stuttgart, and I think they could beat them if it's their day in a best of 5. Aalborg, UEA. I mean, if UEA beat Kiel, it's probably a given that they're going to beat them.
Yeah.
These are so many dynamics like that we may not have found or explored, and I do not think our top 4 is going to be the top 4 seeds. I really don't.
Yeah, I think the one comparison which sticks out for me is what if Kiel does run into UEA or something like that. I feel like that is the perfect comparison, which is telling of the depth particularly, because these two teams are very, very closely matched, I think, in terms of when they hit their peak, what sort of a performance they can deliver. And of course, I'm going to be biased towards Kiel. I was playing them the whole of last year. I know they're incredible. They went to CRL, and they were only the series to really make it difficult for the rest of the competition, unlike myself. So massive props to them, but also UEA as well. They have that potential, and those underdogs like IUL as well. If UEA can do it, why can't they do it? It's just there's so many possibilities.
We're gonna have to find out when the event itself starts. Of course, this Saturday, the 26th, it's 4 p.m. for us in the UK when it all kicks off. Keep your eye on the Discord as well at Uni Rocketeers. This has been Learner Drivers in week 4. It has basically been me and Psycho, just us two, lad. At the end, Nua has died. Thank you so much for standing in for KJ. If only we could permanently replace him with you. He might be listening to this. It might upset his feelings. But no, it's been an honor. If there's anything you'd like to say or criticisms, terrible takes we've had, the floor is yours, because I think we're happy with this episode.
I'm absolutely happy, and it's been a pleasure to be on here today. I've not talked for such a duration of time before, so it's been a new experience for me and a pleasure to replace the legend in our space that is KJ. And I'm so glad that this actually exists as well, because I remember there being discussions in sort of even like the NSE general chat before the UR general chat was conceived about, know what, let's stick a podcast together, and it simply never happens. The fact that it's here, fantastic, and cheers for having me on as well.
Oh, thanks for being the finest of hosts, stepping in at the time of need as well. I hope you've all appreciated the episode and Psycho being here. This has been week 4, episode 4, from wherever you're watching this. And whenever you need to take something from this week, just remember, Nualayak once saw a man. Thank you.